Around the world, architects, engineers, and visionaries are building where no one dared before, on the water. These aren't boats, they're real, fully functioning buildings and communities that are designed to float, sometimes for decades, sometimes for generations. So join me, I'm going to count down 15 amazing floating buildings. Starting with number 15, the ArkUp Livable Yacht in Miami, Florida. Floating home? Check. Luxury yacht? Check. Hurricane-proof building on the water? Surprisingly, check. Enter the ArkUp Livable Yacht. This is a real-world hybrid between a houseboat, a luxury floating home, and a self-sustaining building that has turned heads across the globe since its debut in Miami. With its retractable hydraulic legs, solar-powered systems, and sleek, modern design, the ArkUp is more than just a home on the water. It is a prototype for how people might live in flood-prone coastal regions. The structure itself is 75 feet long, 32 feet wide, and it weighs around 210 tons. Now, at first glance, it looks like a modern house. Large glass panels, clean lines, rooftop solar, and spacious decks. But it floats, and the floating isn't passive. It's equipped with 4 hydraulic spuds that are retractable legs that can be lowered into the seabed, which lifts the entire thing up to 20 feet above the waterline. This not only stabilizes the unit during storms, but it allows it to withstand Category 4 hurricane conditions, including storm surges and heavy wind. In other words, it can anchor itself like a barge or float freely like a yacht, making it completely amphibious. It's got a top speed of about 7 knots, which is kind of slow, but it's powered by an electric propulsion system and a 30 kilowatt solar array that feeds it 1,000 kilowatts per hour of battery storage, making it an entirely self-sufficient solution. The first prototype launched in 2019 in Biscayne Bay, Miami, and was listed at $5.5 million. Of course it was. It quickly became a media sensation, appearing on CNBC, Forbes, Architectural Digest, and it even has a Netflix series. Critics have noted the cost as a barrier to widespread adoption, but ArkUp has plans for smaller, more affordable models. They've also drawn comparisons to floating architecture in the Netherlands, where amphibious housing projects are becoming increasingly common. From a regulatory standpoint, though, it does pose some interesting questions. Is it a boat? A house? Both? Well, in most places, it's treated like a vessel, which means it avoids some of the more restrictive zoning laws that are tied to real estate. But that could change as cities begin to grapple with amphibious living on a broader scale. Today, only a few units exist, and they're not sci-fi concepts, they're real, tested and functioning homes that float, anchor, move, and survive storms, all while offering comfort, security, and a little bit of sustainability. As our climate resilience becomes a global imperative, the ArkUp Livable Yacht isn't just an exotic Miami luxury. It may be the first chapter in our new floating future. Number 14, the Skoon Ship, the floating neighborhood. In the heart of Amsterdam's former industrial north, between the revitalized shipyards and canals, lies one of Europe's most ambitious experiments, the Skoon Ship. This is no futuristic rendering or an architectural theory. This is real. It's a functioning floating neighborhood made up of 46 waterborne households and designed from the ground up to be energy neutral, community-driven, and fully integrated with the water that it floats on. Completed in 2020 after a decade of planning, it's often referred to as the most sustainable floating urban district in Europe. Well, its name, which means clean ship in Dutch, reflects both the aquatic nature and its ecological mission to prove that floating living can be comfortable, beautiful, and scalable. The neighborhood consists of 30 of these floating pods, each of which hosts 1 to 3 residential units, and the homes are custom designed, creating a visually eclectic but harmonious planned waterfront. Each home is built on top of a concrete floating foundation. That's typically a hollow pontoon of reinforced concrete with internal ballast systems. Those can be adjusted for weight distribution. The platforms are moored using steel guideposts, allowing them to rise and fall with the water level. Now, that's a critical design choice in a country where more than 25% of the land is below sea level. Now, what makes it stand out beyond the floating thing is its infrastructure. The entire neighborhood is energy positive. It uses solar rooftop panels that collectively generate more power than the community consumes. It's linked via a private smart grid where residents can trade electricity using blockchain tech. It's equipped with heat pumps, green roofs, biodegradable insulation materials, which all minimize the need for external heating or cooling. They're connected to a central gray water system. That's where water from showers and sinks is purified through a biofiltration plant on site. One of its greatest strengths is the cooperative governance model. Now, the neighborhood was initiated by a group of sustainability-minded citizens who formed a collective in 2009. They recruited architects, engineers, and of course funding partners, and they worked with the city of Amsterdam to secure the water lots. Each resident was involved in the planning process, and the result is a community with shared values and responsibilities, making decisions together on upgrades, maintenance, and public programming. Architecturally, the homes range from sleek modern cubes with full glass facades to more playful angular designs with these pop-out balconies and rooftop gardens. Some are clad in timber, others recycled aluminum or composite panels. Well, despite their differences, all buildings are limited to 3 stories, with an average interior size of around 150 to 180 square meters. The Skoon Ship isn't about luxury, it is about livability and neighborhood-level climate action. It does prove that floating communities can be more futuristic than gimmicks. They can be real, they can be vibrant, and they're fully integrated into a city's social and environmental fabric. Number 13. The floating Seahorse villas in Dubai. So yeah, when Dubai sets out to build something, it rarely stops at conventional. From the Burj Khalifa to artificial palm-shaped islands, this city is a masterclass in ambition. But perhaps no project captures Dubai's penchant for the spectacular better than the floating Seahorse villas. They're not boats, they're not barges, they are floating buildings in the truest sense. They're anchored in place, fully habitable, and engineered to redefine the boundary between architecture and the sea. Now, these villas are located just off the coast of Dubai within the ambitious The World archipelago. That's the sprawling man-made collection of islands that are shaped like a map of the world. It was developed by the Kleindienst Group. These villas are part of a larger luxury destination called the Heart of Europe, which does seek to offer ultra-exclusive vacation and residential options for the global elite. Each villa is a 3-story, 4,000 square foot structure. But here's the twist. One of those floors is underwater. The lowest level of each structure contains a master bedroom and a bathroom fully submerged beneath the surface, with panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows offering views into a specially designed coral garden. The middle level, the main deck, floats at sea level. Now this is where you'll find the open-plan living room, kitchen, and dining area, plus those floor-to-ceiling doors and windows that open onto a private over-water deck. It is a seamless fusion of indoor and outdoor space, with the sound of the water gently lapping against the structure's sides and amazing views of the Persian Gulf. On the top level, the upper deck, residents enjoy a private sun terrace, a jacuzzi, outdoor shower, and a sunbathing area. The entire roof is built for relaxation, and because these villas are spaced pretty generously apart, there's a surprising level of privacy despite the openness of the sea. But make no mistake, they are permanently moored. They connect to utilities via submerged infrastructure, and each villa is stabilized using flotation and anchoring tech. The engineering draws from the oil rig design principles and floating pontoon architecture that's adapted for private luxury use, of course, and the structures have to endure harsh sunlight, saltwater corrosion, and the occasional regional storm, all while maintaining 5-star comfort. Initially unveiled in 2015, the first phase of the villas sold out almost instantly, with buyers coming from over 50 countries. Prices ranged from $2.8 million to over $5 million, depending on customization, and with some owners opting for a private butler service and yacht moorings, and even personal seaplanes. While critics have pointed to the environmental cost of projects like this, especially in sensitive marine ecosystems like the Persian Gulf, however, the development group is countered by citing its coral regeneration programs, environmental impact studies, and sustainable energy use. But there's no question that the villas have helped shape the public imagination about what floating architecture could look like in the 21st century. These villas aren't designed to solve housing crises or serve millions, but they do pose an important question. If you could live anywhere, and I mean literally anywhere, why not float? Number 12. The Floating Church of Copenhagen. In the waters of Copenhagen's harbor, in a city that's known for its design innovation and sustainability, floats one of the most surprising houses of worship in Europe, the Floating Church. This entirely real, fully functioning Lutheran church doesn't just sit by the water, it sits on the water. It's docked at various harbors around the Danish capital. It was completed in 2016. The floating church was conceived as a radical rethink of how religious institutions interact with the community, especially in modern cities where real estate is expensive. It's built on top of a modified steel pontoon barge, about 14 meters wide and 35 meters long. It's large enough to accommodate gatherings of up to 150 people. The entire superstructure is composed of white painted wood and translucent fiberglass panels, arranged in clean vertical lines that echo the geometry of classic churches. Inside, the structure is sparse but serene, a whitewashed interior which is filled with natural light that opens through semi-translucent walls. Simple wooden benches face a raised altar, and a small pipe organ provides music for services. There's no heavy ornamentation, just the interplay of light, water, and the quiet presence of faith. Functionally, the church is more than just a floating box. It has a sanctuary for regular worship services, weddings, baptisms, and funerals. There's a community hall used for meetings, children activities, and musical performances. This is a mobile ministry that docks at different neighborhoods throughout Copenhagen, sometimes staying in one location for weeks before moving to another. And there's of course basic utilities like electricity and water hookups provided by the harbor. Now, in terms of legality, the floating church is fully certified as a seaworthy vessel. It's registered with the Danish maritime authorities and insured for public use. The floating platform meets all the local building codes for temporary structures, and it adheres to the same fire and safety regulations. The project was initially a bit controversial. Traditionalists whether a church could maintain its sanctity while moving from harbor to harbor, and some critics called it a publicity stunt. But at its launch, the church has been embraced by many Copenhageners as a symbol of adaptability and creativity. And in that context, the floating church isn't just a religious structure. It's an experiment in what architecture can be when it's freed from the constraints of location. And in a time when cities are increasingly defined by fluid populations and rising seas, it does pose a compelling question. What happens when our most permanent institutions decide to move with us? Number 11. Blue 21, the floating pavilion. So if there's one place that has earned global respect for mastering the battle between land and water, it is the Netherlands, a nation literally built on reclaimed land and complex water management. The Dutch have always approached rising seas with pragmatic innovation. In the modern age, the Dutch are once again leading the way, not just holding water back, but designing ways to live with it. One of the most groundbreaking examples of this is the floating pavilion in Rotterdam, a real-world prototype for the cities of the future. Built in 2010 by the architecture and innovation collective known as Blue 21, this floating pavilion is a semi-autonomous, climate-resilient floating structure designed for urban use. It represents a crucial proof of concept that large public-use buildings can not only exist on water, but thrive there without fossil fuels, without flooding, without a permanent foundation. This pavilion consists of 3 interconnected hemispherical domes built on a floating platform roughly 46 meters long and about 24 meters wide, moored securely to the harbor floor. It houses a large multi-purpose event space, reception areas, technical rooms, and flexible office space, with room for up to 500 people at any given time. Now, each of these domes is made from a substance known as ethylene tetrafluoroethylene. This is a high-performance plastic that's incredibly strong, ultra-light, and fully transparent. ETFE, as it's known, is often used in stadiums and greenhouse gardens because it allows light in while providing insulation and resisting wear from UV. But where the floating platform truly excels is in the sustainability systems it has. It is completely off-grid for heating and cooling. It uses a combination of solar panels, a water-based heat exchange system, and passive design principles. During the summer, water from the harbor is pumped through pipes to help cool the structure. In the winter, that same water is used as a heat sink for warming the air. The roof includes rainwater catchment and filtration, which does reduce reliance on municipal water supplies, and the building's designed to be energy neutral, and even after a decade of operation, it continues to serve as a test bed for floating construction systems. The floating pavilion has hosted hundreds of events. It's been visited by royalty, architects, and engineers from around the world, all of them eager to see how cities might respond to the dual crises of rising seas and shrinking land availability. More than that, it's influenced policy. The area is slated for further development using similar technology, including floating parks, residential buildings, and even floating roads. Its role as a bridge between innovation and realism, it does prove one thing, that floating buildings don't have to be science fiction. They can be scalable, sustainable, and most importantly, livable right now. Number 10. The Frying Pan Lightship. So, docked unassumingly at Pier 66A on Manhattan's west side, surrounded by modern yachts and dinner cruises, sits a rusty red vessel with a curved white cabin, a small lighthouse structure on its deck, and a name that few recognize outside maritime circles: the Lightship Frying Pan. Though it may look like a piece of floating nostalgia, the Frying Pan is in fact a historic floating building, a fully preserved example of a unique architectural hybrid, the floating lighthouse. Lightships are one of the most fascinating but often overlooked building types in history. Before modern GPS and satellite-based navigation, lightships were used in places where it was impossible to build a permanent lighthouse. These were ships that served as stationary floating beacons that were moored to the seafloor in dangerous shipping lanes, estuaries, and shallow coasts. They were manned by lighthouse keepers, often for weeks or months at a time, and they functioned as both navigational aids and tiny self-sustaining outposts. The ship itself is about 133 feet long, and it's made from riveted steel with a double hull design. But what makes it remarkable isn't just its role as a maritime structure, it's the fact that it's been repurposed as a floating public venue, anchored permanently in New York City and preserved as a functional piece of architecture. After being decommissioned in 1965, the Frying Pan fell into disrepair, and it eventually sank in Chesapeake Bay. It was salvaged after several years underwater, restored by preservationists in the 1980s and 90s, and then it was towed to New York, where it now serves as a floating event space. Today, it operates as part of the Pier 66 Maritime Complex, a cultural entertainment venue that includes other historic vessels like the John J. Harvey fireboat. Now, architecturally, it does represent a fascinating example of adaptive reuse. A building designed for one kind of survival, helping ships avoid disaster, now it's surviving in a totally different role. It floats not just on the water, but through time. The Frying Pan is not a lighthouse in the traditional sense. It's not a ship anymore either. It is a building that floats, a cultural artifact that sails through your memory, and it's a living reminder that architecture, when it meets the sea, doesn't have to stay anchored to the past. Number 9. The Lily Pad Floating Ecopolis, Paris. So this isn't a structure that floats today, but it is a fully engineered, architecturally valid concept that has been presented, modeled, and recognized by governments. It was designed by a Belgian architect, Vincent Callebaut. The Lily Pad is a floating city concept that integrates renewable energy systems, a biophilic architecture, and marine ecology into a single zero-emissions urban habitat. Though no lily pad has been built yet, the design has passed multiple engineering assessments for feasibility, including reviews by European urban innovation institutes. So it stands on the edge of conceptual and practical, and it belongs on this list because it is based entirely on real engineering principles, unlike some speculative sci-fi floating cities. Callebaut's design is envisioned as a self-sustaining amphibious city capable of housing over 50,000 people and drifting autonomously across the oceans. Its form is modeled on the Amazonian water lily, which is a large open center and a gently curved periphery. Now, the floating structure would span roughly 500 meters in diameter, with an interior freshwater lagoon, terraced housing zones, research labs, energy generation fields, and full vertical farming. Structurally, the lily pad would be made of flexible polyester fibers and titanium-reinforced mesh. Now, that's supported by a floating platform of maritime concrete and advanced foam. The structure would be divided into 3 main levels. The first, which is a subaquatic base that houses the ballast systems, algae farms, waste treatment, and desalination units. The second would be the central lagoon and lower ring that features residential housing, schools, shops, and community spaces. The third is the upper dome and green terraces. Now that includes greenhouses, wind turbines, vertical gardens, and photovoltaic membranes embedded into the roof. Every surface of the lily pad would serve a function. The shell, like a canopy, would capture rainwater and sunlight, which would channel it into energy and irrigation systems. Now, the lily pad isn't just green in theory, it's blue by design. The structure is intended to coexist with the marine environment rather than displacing it. Calabo has proposed these lily pads as resilient refuges for the estimated 200 million people who become climate refugees by 2050 due to rising sea levels. And yet, while no country has fully commissioned a lily pad, components of the design like its energy capture systems, floating gardens, and its modular aquaculture techniques have already influenced real-world projects in the Maldives, Dubai, and Rotterdam. Whether or not it's built in the next decade, though, the lily pad has already changed the conversation about what cities might look like when the sea does reclaim the land. It isn't fiction, it's architecture, drawn with blueprints, budgets, and science. It's just waiting for the tides to catch up. Number 8. Sausalito Houseboat Community in California. Just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco lies one of the most unique floating communities in the world, the Sausalito Houseboats. Now, these aren't novelty vessels or ultra-modern floating mansions. It's a living neighborhood with addresses, mailboxes, school buses, voting precincts, and plumbing, built entirely on the water. And unlike many modern floating projects, the Sausalito Houseboat Community is not built on dreams of the future, but on the back of rebellion, counterculture, and decades of architectural improvisation. It's located in the waters of Richardson Bay. This community comprises more than 400 floating homes, many of which began their lives as surplus barges, retired military pontoons, or salvaged vessels. The origins of this community go back to the post-World War II era, when a group of artists, sailors, and war veterans began anchoring makeshift houseboats in the bay to avoid San Francisco's housing prices and zoning restrictions. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, this houseboat area grew into a bohemian haven, attracting beat poets, musicians, hippies, and tinkerers. Some of these homes were fashioned from scavenged ship hulls, some cabins set atop floating oil drums. The rules were simple: anchor somewhere safe, connect yourself to the dock, and contribute to the floating life. By the 1970s, the community had become a cultural landmark, but also a source of controversy. As development pressures increased and land environmental regulations expanded, these floating homes faced pushback from local authorities. Legal battles ensued over anchorage rights, sewage disposal, and maritime zoning. Well, eventually a compromise was reached. Two major harbor areas, Gate 5 and Gate 6, were designated as legal floating residential zones. And today, the area is regulated by the Richardson Bay's regional agency, and floating home residents enjoy most of the same legal rights and responsibilities as those living on land. Despite their floating nature, though, these structures aren't mobile. Most are anchored permanently and connected to municipal utilities. They receive mail, trash pickup, Amazon deliveries, and even visits from political candidates. Residents vote in local elections, pay taxes, and participate in community boards. In short, it is a real neighborhood. It just happens to bob up and down with the tides. But culturally, the houseboat community remains as vibrant as ever. There are floating libraries, floating art galleries, and even floating concerts. The neighborhood has a floating homes tour each year, which draws thousands of visitors to explore the architecture and hear the stories from residents who have spent decades here. Some homes have changed hands for over $1 million. That's a far cry from their scavenged beginnings. Yet the soul of the place remains intact, fiercely independent, inventive, and anchored to a belief that living on water is not just possible, but it's beautiful. Moving on to number 7, the Fogo Island Inn Floating Sauna. On the northeastern edge of Newfoundland, where the North Atlantic meets the rugged coast of Fogo Island, it sits one of the most remarkable examples of floating architecture. Not because it's massive or expensive, but because it's delicate, isolated, and it's intimately connected to the environment. This is the Fogo Island Inn Floating Sauna, a real, functional, and astonishingly minimal floating building that represents a confluence of traditional craftsmanship, environmental awareness, and modern design. Now, to be clear, the main Fogo Island Inn itself is not floating. The hotel sits on stilts, and it's inspired by traditional Newfoundland outport structures. But a short distance away in the harbor floats a structure that is a minimalist wooden sauna built by hand, tethered to a wet dock, bobbing up and down with the tide. The floating sauna is one of several Fogo Island studios. It was created as part of an artist-in-residence program, and that was launched by the Shorefast Foundation. The program was designed to rejuvenate the island's local economy after the collapse of the cod fishing industry and to reassert the island's cultural identity through design and craft. It's constructed of a base of timber pontoons, and it gently rises and falls with the water, tied securely to land by hand-woven ropes and removable walkways. Now, what makes it extraordinary isn't just the construction or its use, it's the way that it fits into the broader narrative of the place. This is a building that can't be separated from its context. It floats not to demonstrate wealth or excess, but it belongs to a culture of water, boats, and determination. The sauna is available to guests of the inn and visiting artists, and it's often used in tandem with cold water plunges. That's a centuries-old tradition in maritime cultures believed to boost circulation and mental clarity, which, yeah, I can attest it does. Architecturally, the sauna is a masterpiece of restraint. The exterior is clad in rough spruce planks, weathered to a silvery gray. The interior is lined with smooth cedar, chosen for its heat resistance and its natural aroma. But unlike many floating buildings, this sauna wasn't built for scale, replication, or commercialization. It was built to belong. It exists in one place for one purpose: to remind people of their connection to nature, to ritual, and to the sea. In a world where floating architecture is often flashy, digital, and speculative, this little sauna in Newfoundland whispers a quiet possibility: that floating doesn't have to be futuristic. It can be ancient, humble, and still entirely profound. Number 6. The Oslo Opera House Barge Stage. Alright, that's a tough one to say, but few buildings are as universally admired in modern Scandinavian architecture as the Oslo Opera House. But what many visitors don't know is that each summer, the opera extends its reach, literally, onto the water. That's when a massive floating barge stage is assembled adjacent to the Opera House, which transforms Oslo's harbor into one of the most unique floating performance venues. Now, the floating stage isn't permanent. It is reconstructed annually, usually in the late spring, in preparation for the Opera on the Roof summer concert series. It was originally conceived as a way to democratize high art, to make opera and orchestral music accessible to the public free of charge. Now, technically speaking, the barge is a fully engineered modular pontoon system. It's assembled by a team of engineers, naval architects, and stage technicians. The platform's about 30 meters by 20 meters, with a capacity for large-scale sets, orchestras, and ballet ensembles. Now, the surface of the stage is reinforced, of course, to bear thousands of pounds of equipment, and its superstructure includes mounting points for lighting rigs, sound equipment, and temporary backups. Behind the scenes, power is supplied through some underwater cables that are routed from the main opera house, while sound and lighting are operated through wireless remote consoles or floating control booths docked on adjacent pontoons. This floating stage has hosted everything from Wagner to Björk. In 2014, a full production of Carmen was staged there, with the singers projecting across the water to thousands seated on the roof along the quayside. The backdrop of the fjord, with the shifting light and occasional seabird flying by, became part of the set. As cities around the world seek to activate their waterfronts and use public space more creatively, Oslo's floating opera stage is like a beacon. It's not a permanent building, it's a floating architectural event, real, repeatable, and it's a powerful example of how cultural infrastructure can literally expand onto the water. In the end, what this floating stage offers is more than just entertainment. It's a glimpse of what happens when art, engineering, and the water come together, not to escape the world, but to share it. Number 5. The Floating School of Makoko in Nigeria. In the heart of Lagos, one of Africa's fastest-growing megacities, is the watery community of Makoko, a dense, informal settlement of stilt houses built over the Lagos Lagoon. For decades, Makoko has been a symbol of urban marginalization, and it exists almost entirely outside of any city planning. There are few roads, no sewer systems, and little formal infrastructure. Yet over 100,000 people call it home, most of them working as fishermen, traders, or laborers. And in 2013, in this unlikely neighborhood, it became the site of one of the most powerful experiments in floating architecture, the Makoko Floating School. Designed by Nigerian architect Kunle Adeyemi, the Makoko Floating School was a revolutionary prototype, a modular, triangular, self-sustaining building designed to float, function, and educate, all without needing access to dry land. It wasn't just a school, it was a puzzle, a new way of thinking about how cities could adapt to rising sea levels. The building, of course, is completely off-grid. It collected rainwater for washing and irrigation, used natural ventilation to cool the interiors, and it incorporated solar panels for basic lighting and electronics. Most importantly, though, it floated, anchored in place by tethers and flexible moorings. It could survive flooding, too. It was impervious to shifting ground conditions and was made almost entirely of locally sourced materials, timber from Lagos markets, recycled barrels, and woven reeds. The school quickly became a beacon not just for Makoko, but for the global architecture and development communities. It was featured in major exhibitions, won multiple awards, and became a case study in publications from the United Nations to Harvard GSD. But the story of this floating school is not one of easy success. The original structure functioned for 3 years, providing education for dozens. But in 2016, after heavy rains and ongoing maintenance issues, the building partially collapsed. There were no injuries, and the structure was vacant at the time, but it raised important questions about durability. Cities argued that the school had become a media darling without proper integration into the city's education system or infrastructure. Others pointed out that local authorities had never officially sanctioned the structure, making it vulnerable to neglect. But supporters countered that the school's collapse wasn't a failure. It was a prototype designed to be tested, refined, and reimagined. And that's exactly what happened. In 2017, NLE Architects launched a second iteration of this concept, a refined, structurally improved version called the MFS-2, the Makoko Floating School 2. It was assembled in Venice in just 10 days, and it demonstrated to global leaders and later relocated to Belgium, where it became part of the Arsenal Floating Exhibition. But more than anything, this Makoko Floating School, it asked a simple question. What if the future of education doesn't even need land? Number 4. The Arctic Bath in Sweden. In the north of Sweden, along the winding curves of the Lule River, floats one of the most unique spas and wellness retreats ever built, the Arctic Bath. Now, this is unlike any traditional hotel. This is a remarkable circular structure that sits directly on top the river's surface. Sometimes frozen in winter, gently bobbing in summer, and it offers guests a luxurious and environmentally conscious experience. It opened in early 2020, and it's located near the small village of Harads, about 50 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle, and it is best known for offering a blend of minimalist Nordic design and raw nature-based therapy, all while literally floating on a river. The building is made from locally sourced pine and birch, with untreated logs forming a sculptural outer wall. Now, that wall doubles as a wind shield and natural camouflage, which kind of blends the spa into the forest surroundings. Inside, you'll find a central cold water plunge pool that's carved into the ice in winter, which is awesome. Dry and steam saunas warmed by locally harvested firewood and geothermal heat. Treatment rooms for Arctic-inspired wellness, including wild herb massages and polar scrubs. The resort is fully powered by renewable energy, which uses a combination of solar panels, local hydroelectric connections, and some biothermal heating systems. Wastewater is treated on site, and food served at the spa's restaurant is seasonal, local, and sustainably sourced. But from an engineering perspective, it was a challenge. The river's ice can grow up to a meter thick in winter, and melt flows in spring can rise rapidly. The structure's pontoons and moorings had to be specially designed to resist ice pressure, allow for thermal expansion, and anchor the building without harming the ecosystem. Despite the challenges, the Arctic Bath has become a global icon. Featured in National Geographic, Time magazine, and other international architecture journals, it's often booked out months in advance. But it's more than just a wellness destination. It is an example of how floating architecture can embrace seasonal change, not resist it. It's about being part of it, and even when the water turns to ice and the sun disappears for weeks. In an age where floating architecture is often associated with tech-heavy tropical or futuristic cities, the Arctic Bath offers something radically different. A retreat that's frozen but floating in place, simply elegant and utterly unforgettable. Number 3. The Floating Mosque of Jedha, Saudi Arabia. Sitting in the waters of the Red Sea, the Floating Mosque of Jedha, officially known as Al Rama Mosque, is one of the most visually iconic and meaningful structures in Saudi Arabia, and it's one of the world's most famous floating religious buildings. It's located at the tip of the Jeddah Corniche, and it was built in 1985 and has since become both a spiritual sanctuary and a beloved attraction. The mosque welcomes worshippers and visitors, including non-Muslims. That's a rarity in Saudi Arabia, where access to many religious sites is often restricted. Its floating appearance, combined with that intricate Islamic architecture and open access, has made it a symbol of spiritual openness, architectural grace, and even harmony between religion and nature. The building features a large central dome, and it's clad in light blue tiles to mirror the ocean, surrounded by smaller domes and minarets that draw from Ottoman and contemporary Saudi design. Inside, the prayer hall can accommodate up to 2,500 worshippers, with arched windows offering amazing views of the sea. And during morning or evening prayers, the reflections of the structure on the water, combined with the rhythmic call to prayer echoing over the waves, create a uniquely tranquil atmosphere. In terms of construction, the floating illusion was achieved through careful elevation planning rather than building the mosque on land and reclaiming the sea around it. As is common in waterfront development, engineers built the platform directly in the water, using a pile driving method to anchor the columns securely. For the city of Jeddah, though, historically a gateway for Muslim pilgrims arriving by sea en route to Mecca, the mosques hold a symbolic value. Its location near the coast speaks to the spiritual journey of the faithful, and its architectural lightness represents the transitory nature of the material world, in contrast with the eternal. In a time when cities have to increasingly adapt to climate realities, the floating mosque of Jeddah is an early, elegant example of a sacred building designed to coexist with water rather than resist it. And in doing so, it remains not just an amazing design, but a symbol of faith that literally rises with the tide. Number 2. The Water Nest 100. On the outskirts of Rome, along a stretch of the Tiber River, floats one of the most innovative examples of circular architecture and sustainable living, the Water Nest 100. It was designed by the celebrated Italian architect Giancarlo Zema for the eco-tech company EcoFlow Life. The water nest is solar-powered, self-sustaining, and a real manufacturable, fully functioning structure that can be moored on rivers, lakes, or even calm coastal waters. But what makes it unique isn't just that it floats, but that it's built from 100% recycled and recyclable materials, making it one of the first truly circular floating homes in the world. The entire design philosophy is rooted in sustainability and minimal impact on the surrounding ecosystem. It is a genuine prototype for the eco-homes of tomorrow, available for purchase and deployment today. The structure is dome-shaped, a soft, organic ellipse that measures 12 meters in diameter, that's about 39 feet, with 100 square meters of internal living space. The exterior shell is made of laminated recycled wood, sealed and treated for marine durability. But one of the most striking features is the fully integrated photovoltaic skin. The curved roof is covered in 60 square meters of high-efficiency solar panels capable of producing up to 4 kilowatts of electricity. That's enough to meet all of the structure's lighting, HVAC, and appliance needs. Inside, the home is designed with modular flexibility. It can be configured as a single-family dwelling, an office space, a retail gallery, or even a floating cafe. The interiors are pretty sleek, minimalist, and dominated by sustainable materials: bamboo flooring, natural fiber textiles, LED lighting, and low VOC paints. It's equipped, of course, with a rainwater harvesting system, gray water recycling, and a compact bio-toilet or marine septic system, allowing it to operate completely off-grid if needed. Crucially, the Water Nest 100 is not just a concept or a one-off showpiece. It has been tested, certified, and it's now commercially available for clients in Europe. But what sets it apart from many other floating homes is the combination of ecological rigor, market readiness, and its beauty. It's not futuristic, it's just here, and it proves that floating architecture doesn't have to be reserved for billionaires or mega projects. It can be small, circular, smart, and deeply human. Number 1. The Ocean Spiral, Shimizu Corporation's vision for a fully submerged floating city. In the pantheon of visionary architecture, few proposals have ever captured the imagination or even challenged the limits of engineering quite like the Ocean Spiral, a fully conceived, scientifically evaluated, and internationally recognized concept for a self-sustaining underwater city. Developed by the Japanese engineering and construction firm Shimizu Corporation, this unprecedented floating megastructure doesn't merely rest on the surface of the water, it spirals down into the ocean itself, proposing a radically new form of marine urbanism where floating and submersion become a unified reality. Although still in the concept phase as of 2024, the Ocean Spiral has undergone detailed feasibility assessments by engineers. It's not science fiction, it is science-driven architecture, and it's grounded in existing materials, environmental modeling, and even marine engineering. At the heart of the ocean spiral is the namesake structure, a 16-kilometer-long helical shaft that descends from a floating spherical city at the ocean's surface down to depths of 3,000 to 4,000 meters. At the surface floats a giant sphere, about 500 meters in diameter, encased in a geodesic dome made of transparent polycarbonate and marine-grade alloys. This upper portion, known as the Blue Garden, would house the main residential, commercial, and recreational zones, home to up to 5,000 permanent residents and supporting more than 40,000 visitors and workers on a rotational basis. Now, unlike conventional floating cities that sit on the water or hover just above it, the ocean spiral is anchored by the submerged spiral city core, called the inverted skyscraper. This is a submerged shaft that's not just structural, it's inhabited with modular pods that are built into the spiral at varying depths. For things like research labs that study marine biology, industrial facilities that extract rare earth elements, living quarters for rotating scientists and engineers, and aquaculture fish hatchery chambers optimized for temperature and currents. One of its most controversial promises, though, is the claim to environmental sustainability. Critics have questioned the impact of such a structure on the deep-sea ecosystems, the carbon cost of construction, and the potential for geopolitical tension over marine territory. But perhaps the most ambitious environmental claim is the ocean spiral's use of deep-sea sequestration. This spiral acts as a controlled venting station for CO2-rich air, which is captured from the city and transported to the Earth factory at the spiral's base. If implemented, it would make the ocean spiral not just carbon neutral, but potentially carbon negative, absorbing more atmospheric carbon than it emits. But beyond all the engineering and the ecology, there's the question of human livability. What's it like to live in a city surrounded by water with a third of its population submerged? Well, the answer, according to Shimizu's designers, lies in psychological architecture. Using biophilic design, light modulation, and social programming to keep residents connected to the world above, homes and workspaces in the Blue Garden include immersive windows, artificial skylights tuned to circadian rhythms, and sky zones where the dome's canopy displays live feeds of the surface digitally reconstructed for underwater dwellers. The living pods are more Spartan, designed for scientific and operational teams working in short rotations. Medical care is handled via telemedicine with emergency decompression chambers available at spiral waypoints. Education, commerce, and governance are networked through augmented reality systems and virtual assemblies, making Ocean Spiral function more like a distributed space station. Now, while the full ocean spiral hasn't yet been built, key components are already under development. In Okinawa, Shimizu has partnered with marine universities to test spiral-based aquaculture farms. The Kyoto Deep Ocean Lab is evaluating the pressure tolerance of spiral habitat modules at depth. Chiba University and the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Tech have completed software simulations of the spiral structure. But the full ocean spiral, according to Shimizu's timeline, could be operational by 2050, with phased implementation starting in the 2030s, depending on funding, of course. The whole thing represents a philosophy that floating isn't just a survival mechanism, it's a new frontier. Not a retreat from Earth, but a rediscovery of its least understood territory, repurposed for habitation, exploration, and regeneration. Whether it ever gets built in full remains uncertain, but in architectural circles, policy forums, and climate discussions, the ocean spiral is now part of the conversation. A floating city not drifting from the world, but diving deeper into it.